Welcome back to the Blueberry Pediatrics podcast. I'm here with Madeline Lauf, founder and CEO of Begin Health. First, I'm just going to let her explain what the company is and all about it. Go ahead, Madeline. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to chat about Begin Health and just generally kids' health. You know, I'm super passionate about the future of kids, and kids in America are unwell. And I founded Begin Health to help build and support the resilient gut microbiome from birth on. And it's really important to me to help build nutritional solutions to common health challenges that kids are facing. And so at Begin, that's what we do, is we help parents either get their unhealthful kid healthy through supporting them with education, tools, and activities, or we also help keep healthy kids healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Nutrition is really the building blocks upon what health is grown, and then we're growing children, so it's really important to do it right. So can you give a little insight into what doing it right looks like?
Yeah, for sure. So modern day parenting is hard, right? Where everyone's moving from activity to activity, or kids are in school all day, parents are working. And the biggest challenge is sometimes feeding families that in ways that are more helpful than what we're seeing. So a lot of over processed foods are in kids' diet, school lunch boxes, cereals in the morning, or, grabbing food on the go from fast food restaurants, or just even restaurants in general. Like, they're using ingredients that are not ones that you would necessarily have in your own kitchen. And so this is really the modern prevalent diet for kids. And it's really having a hard time on their bellies. It's creating a lot of different challenges relating to gut dysbiosis, meaning that the good gut bugs and the bad gut bugs are out of balance, and generally having issues with either leading to issues with constipation or skin issues, irritability, trouble focusing at school. It's just all of this can, in many ways, this can all be related back to the nutrition that kids are having. And so that is one of the things that, we are massive advocates for at Begin Health, is how can we try to have cleaner eating with our kids in a way that can also be easy on parents, right? Like, we can't be making massive, home cooked scratch meals every single night. But what are some substitutes that you can try to reach for that might be healthier and is not really trading that long-term health for that early convenience?
Yeah, it's so hard as a parent myself to pack their lunches with things that are healthy and that they're going to eat. I find the hardest part is selling it to my kids and that making them realize, what's good versus not good, because the processed stuff, they are drawn to it. It's tastier. I think we know that it's just not even a fair fight for food to go up against processed foods, because in the end, processed foods will always win out in taste and addictive qualities. So how do we do that?
It's hard. And picky eating is a big thing. And also, if the kid, especially for school lunches, if your kiddo's not going to get it in their own school lunch, maybe they will try to find other alternatives, or be upset that their friends have something else in that. So for me, I am a really big advocate of still making the foods that they love in healthier ways. So whether that means making chicken nuggets at home if you can, pulling them into the process so they're excited about it, making burgers, right, with ingredients that you agree to, and it's not necessarily the school version or one that you're picking out from fast food. Those are ways that are also economical as well if you're able to buy in bulk and not necessarily having to pay major premiums when you're, on the go after soccer practice. So those are some of the strategies that, we hear parents using, but we agree it's hard. And that's part of what we're trying to do at Begin Health, is how can we build nutrition products for kids that are healthy, but are also still nutritious, clean, and also fun.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. I just want to point out one thing you said that stands out to me, is that we're actually driving our kids away from school lunches because they are not healthy, which just is a whole other issue within itself that I have just personal gripes with. But how terrible is that? We're just set up to fail. And so just like you said, also, my kids don't want to eat what I have because someone next to them has something better. And it's just a lot of education is needed in this space, a lot of reform around what's available in our supermarkets, and then so much work and education by us parents to then, well, for us, so that we can learn how to do it, and then to teach our kids to make those healthy choices. It's a lot working against us, and it's exhausting.
Yes, yes.
But
But
back to,
the
yeah,
one positive thing is I feel like that we can all be really excited about is that parents are more aware today than ever. They're reading labels, they are understanding what's good and what's not so helpful, and they are making better choices. And I think that that will only lead to better solutions from the corporate side, because corporate knows that they need to deliver for their customers, and their customers are demanding it now more than ever. So I think that there's a lot of positive here, and that's only going to bring better, cleaner, nutritious products to market for kids. And companies like Vegan Health, we're innovating to try to meet that demand.
yeah. So tell me about what innovations there are that you've created, and that's how it's helping and what it's doing.
Yeah, so one of the major challenges that we learned early on was that we had initially actually built a kid's milk, and we were super excited. It was an alternative to Horizon Organic that has the chocolate version has like 16 grams of sugar in it, and we were like, you know what, like kids love chocolate milk, but like let's create one with maybe not 16 grams of sugar per serving, right? Or whatever it was at the time. And so we built that, but the challenge was that it was really expensive. COVID was hitting us, and we were piloting it, but we weren't able to get it to market. But what we learned was that the families that were really finding the most benefit from this milk were the families that were also having their kids on laxatives. And we were like, what is going on? Turns out an enormous amount of kids do have to rely on laxatives. And you know what? I can say laxatives can be life saving, right? If your kiddo cannot go, like there is a role and a place for laxative use. And especially when directed by your pediatrician, right? And I'm sure, Lindsey, I'd love to hear from your perspective what you see in the clinics. But the kids are struggling to poop, bottom line. So, what can we do to help support that journey? And that was really where we found the power of building Growing Up Prebiotics. So, Growing Up Prebiotics, they're a prebiotic fiber that supports kiddos on their stooling journey, whether that is helping them with softer stooling, more comfortable stooling. And it was a tasteless and textureless prebiotic, 3 grams of fiber in every single serving. And it was just supporting kiddos that might be struggling with this area. And so that was what we built. And we've had an enormous amount of success getting kids off of long-term laxative use over time. But, I want to be very clear. This is not a cure. This is not a laxative. We simply built a prebiotic supplement that helps support kiddos that are struggling in this category.
Yeah, so interesting. So I think there's a lot to dive into. So I will say, from like doing my research for this chat, it's hard to really dive into the literature out there and say that there's overwhelming support for the use of pre or pro, what a lot of people have heard of, probiotics, for achieving these specific outcomes. And usually the papers will end saying more research is needed, more clinical trials are needed.
Yep.
So
Is Brandon
there
in
are
here?
studies that are supportive of pre and probiotics, and then a lot of them, like I said, just conclude that more research is necessary on a wider scale to tell us that it's absolutely indicated. And so at this point, there's no the American Academy of Pediatrics. There's ones for gastroenterology, which is the study of like the belly and the gut. None of these places are saying 100% this is what should be used and what should be done. However, when you leave it to a pediatrician and when we're in office and you have a kid who has constipation and things that you should try to choose and do, prebiotics and probiotics are one plausible option that have shown to be not dangerous, so that they could be used in a reasonable fashion to trial and see if they help. And then there are some studies, which Madeline, I'd love if you told us about the ones that you quote and go by, because I know you're very rigorous about evidence-based medicine when you are building this, that do show that there's support for these on the marketplace and for what it's doing for kids and constipation.
Yeah, so let's just start. So, Growing Up Prebiotics is composed of 2 ingredients only. One, which is the human milk oligosaccharide, which I'm super excited to share more about,
Yeah.
and the chicory root fiber. And the HMOs, so it's something that, just to share a little bit what HMOs are. Human milk oligosaccharides, they're commonly found in formulas, and human milk oligosaccharides are actually the third leading component of human breast milk. And what they are is that they're carbohydrates that support and feed the good gut bugs inside the belly. And what some of the studies are showing with the human milk oligosaccharides, which they're such an amazing innovation that have been added to infant formulas over the last 10 years, is that they support, one, the softer stooling. They can help the beneficial bacteria growth. They also are, which demonstrates that the kiddos that have the infant formulas with the HMOs demonstrated to have fewer incidents of respiratory and upper respiratory challenges, because what the HMOs are doing is they're actually helping crowd out the pathogenic bacteria. And so that is very helpful to the baby. And when it's the third most abundant component of human breast milk, like, we know that that's helpful. And so when your kiddo can get that, if you're looking at infant formulas or, breastfeeding, of course, will help you deliver that. But if you're unable to, an infant formula that delivers that the studies do demonstrate that piece. And so we're really excited to build on that and bring the human milk oligosaccharide, what we say, beyond the breastfeeding years. So helping support still the beneficial bacteria, but maybe after your kiddo has already transitioned off of breastfeeding or formula feeding. So we're really excited about that. The piece that really supports the softer stooling is really the chicory root fiber, with 3 grams of fiber in every serving. And so the chicory root fiber has been very well studied in the pediatric population, which is why we chose it. And what the couple different studies have demonstrated is that the use of 4 grams of this prebiotic in the diet in 2 to 5 year olds, that the study was conducted in 2017, resulted in softer stool consistency. And although the stool frequency was not statistically that different and significant. So what is really important here, especially when we look at constipation, is that actually frequency of stooling was not an outcome, but it was more about how comfortable was it to pass and what was the quality and consistency of it when it did pass. And a lot of times, a lot of these kiddos do struggle with hard stooling, uncomfortable stooling, which can then lead to withholding, and then that's a downward spiral, right? Mm-hmm. So we're really excited about the chicory root fiber, because we know also that fiber can support softer stooling and also the improved composition of the good gut bugs. And so that is very well studied. So that is really the whole piece around Growing Up Prebiotics, is how can we build the underlying good gut bugs, which we know at this population, like the bifidobacteria, are helpful, and how can we support that? Because a lot of times when kiddos are not getting the prebiotics in their food, they still need to get it from somewhere. And so Growing Up Prebiotics supports when families are unable to get the full fiber from their diets, which we know the goal that is the recommended dose of, or the recommended target for fiber is between 19 grams, and I believe it's 25 grams for kids. And if you're not getting that, we know 95% of kids and adults are not getting the recommended daily fiber. This is one tool to help bridge that gap.
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you. And are you studying this on your own as well?
That is a fabulous question. We are super excited that we've seen this be such a really helpful piece in many kids that have had, challenges with their stooling. And so we are now exploring our own study to demonstrate this over the coming year.
That's great. I really look forward to seeing that. It's really interesting. Okay, so as a pediatrician, I do know that there are pediatricians who do recommend this when maybe other things aren't working, and there are parents who want to use this before using a laxative. And so what we always decide between is risk versus benefit. So what are the risks, and are there any? And I have a follow-up question about manufacturing and FDA regulation. So let's start with what are the risks in general,
Well,
it's intertwined into one.
whenever you're having a stooling issue with your kiddo, right? And a lot of times it can be long term. Some kids have been on laxatives for years,
Yep.
right? And a lot of times families are just looking, they've already tried everything and it's just, they just cannot find the solution. The first thing that we always recommend is please speak to your pediatrician. Like Blueberry is an amazing place to go chat with, your providers, because every single kiddo is unique, right? There could be a unique history. There could be a different health challenge. That all of this needs to be evaluated so working with your pediatrician, first line of recommendation. Number two is that if you are trying to um, sometimes if you are having compact stool or carrying a large fecal load, adding more fiber may not be the best solution, right? Because they're already backed up, and maybe adding fiber could actually continue to back them up. And I'm sure, Lindsey, you've experienced that as well. Another thing is that if your kiddos do not have the good beneficial bacteria, if you are feeding them the food for the good beneficial bacteria, this may not work for them because the good bugs are not able to eat the food because they don't really exist. And we're starting to see that this is more and more common. A study out of Stanford came out in 2020 that a lot of babies are actually not even being born with the good gut bugs. And this is a really big issue, right? And there's so many, that's a whole other topic, is like, where are the good gut bugs? I'm asking that question, right? So that could be another challenge, is like, hey, it's not working for me. Well, we may need to dig a little bit deeper. So there are definitely use cases where, you don't want to get down on yourself for it, like this one thing not working, but we have seen that it can support so many kiddos' journeys, and it's worth trying if that happens to be your situation.
And so what about manufacturing processes and anything that's not FDA regulated and it's not prescribed, so it's not really monitored? Like, how do parents know in general, even like what they say they're getting is what they're getting, and that it's not going to cause damage of any kind?
Yeah. So what's really important for parents to really know is that in order to have a product on the market in the US, your ingredients need to be something called generally recognized as safe, like something that demonstrates safety for your ingredient at a certain age. And so both of our ingredients are both generally recognized as safe, which they pass the safety level for our dose and for the age. So that part is perfect. The other part is the actual manufacturing practice, right? And when it comes to manufacturing all processes, you really want to make sure that your facility is GMP certified. So that is the good manufacturing practices that the facility follows, that if the FDA were to show up, they would follow all of the guidelines. And so that is something that is really important when you are evaluating products at Begin Health. Of course, like, we work with manufacturers that are GMP certified.
Okay, great. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. There have been cases of, actually don't know about prebiotics, where like probiotics, because I work in a NICU, so the neonatal ICU, where like contamination occurred, and that's very scary because it can have big implications for small babies who are like don't have built up immunity. I have to ask, anything like that ever
Yeah.
happen in the space?
Yeah. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And so we do have a baby product. It's called Begin Baby, that is HMOs plus some probiotics, B. infantis, one of the leading bifidobacterias for infants. And that product is actually built in an infant grade pre and prebiotic and probiotic facility. So there are facilities that are infant grade certified, and that's different from the probiotics, which are just a generally, GMP certified facility that are for ages 1 and up. So I fully agree with you, Lindsey. Like, infants are a whole new level of scrutiny, and it's really important that that is taken very differently than, say, a prebiotic for a kid or a toddler who does have a built up immunity, has a little bit more It's still standard, clean, but it's not as delicate as, say, like the babies in a NICU.
Right. Gotcha. I do want to break down a little bit because I realize some people are very new to this idea about good bacteria and bad bacteria. Can we talk a little bit about what a good bacteria does in the gut and why it's so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what we're learning from the composition of the gut microbiome, and I want to preface this by saying that we are still in the early infancy of understanding the gut microbiome, right? If
Hmm.
anyone tells you that we've already figured it out, then they didn't figure it out because we have not figured it out fully. Because what's really interesting about what the gut microbiome presents is that the gut microbiome, every single one of us has a unique, I like to call gut print. And that is being developed within the early ages. Some people are saying it's developed by around age 3 or 4. Some are saying up as much as age 8. So your gut microbiome is developing. And so you have good gut bacteria that help with your digestive, your immunity, and your nervous system, and many other processes that they are the bugs that support our different living processes. And then you have the opportunistic or negative gut bugs
Which you
that
called pathogens before,
I
so that's
call them
what I mean.
pathogens. Yes, exactly. Pathogens that are not helpful to us and that can have unhelpful outcomes. And what we know, though, is in the early developing infant gut is that it's predominantly the bifidobacteria. That is like the class of these good gut bugs. And so what we do know is that all of us, again, have a different gut print, but at least in the early ages, within the first year of life and even a little bit beyond that, is you want a baby's gut to be predominantly dominated with the bifidobacteria. So again, these are the good bacteria that support digestive health, immune health, nervous system regulation. And this is what's helping these kiddos from this early age develop, with good, positive, lifelong health, right? But if you have some of these pathogenic ones, you can have other challenges. A lot of times now they're equating or they're seeing a correlation with the opportunistic or pathogenic bacteria that can have other health issues, potentially like the chronic illnesses that you see. Maybe you see some eczema presenting. Maybe you see asthma starting to develop. You can even start to see some of the other allergies. And so what they're starting to learn now is that some of these bad bacteria that dominate the gut, if left unchecked, can have longer term health implications. And Lindsey, I'd love to hear from you, like what you're seeing in your clinics and how, the kids are presenting these days with their respect to gut microbiome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I find this topic absolutely fascinating. I agree that we're just starting to understand the impact that it's going to have on growth, on kids, how it impacts us now. I can tell you what we see, which is a lot of stomach issues is constipation. A lot of it is age dependent and voluntary withholding, which is usually caused by like going through potty training and kids are coming out of diapers or are uncomfortable going in the toilet. So they one time was painful pooping and then it just influences them to want to hold it in and they're scared to poop. So much of that is behavioral and then really hard to break the cycle of. And so much is both combining. What we traditionally will do is prescribe a laxative along with behavioral modifications, but you really can't do one of those alone because the idea is to break the cycle. So I have never in my practice recommended prebiotics as a way instead of using laxatives in this case. I don't know if it would have the same impact because you just want to have them like stooling where they can't hold it in. And so while they can't hold it in and they're going to have to go to the potty, you want to create the good behaviors at the same time. I think that what this would be for, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is more so when there are kids who just are constipated and it's not a behavioral thing. It's more, I think, what we call functional constipation, where it's something in your body. Maybe they're not taking enough fluids, fiber, or something in the gut microbiome that we don't yet understand because of their diet. We don't know. So we also do see that, but a majority of the reasons that kids come to us for stomach pain is revolving around constipation.
Yeah, right. And a lot of times, as you mentioned, with like the withholding symptoms, and That's exactly what we hear too, is that the kiddos, they don't want to go. They're smart. If they had one painful experience, they will do everything in their power to not have that painful experience again,
Yeah.
right? And so that's when prebiotics can support that journey, is by helping soften the stooling with the fiber. And so just so that it's more comfortable to pass, that when they do pass, it is not as uncomfortable. But in general, absolutely, if you are carrying a large fecal load, if those kiddos, like, they need to go, they need to use what is recommended by their doctors, like a laxative, to help just clear that large fecal load.
Yeah.
Because it can get really out of hand. And for parents that are listening, it's like, this is a biomarker that you are coming into contact with through your kiddo to see. It's almost like your report card on their digital, or like not a digital report card, but it's a report card on the state of their health. And you can tell a lot by just the consistency, the color, and how comfortable it was to pass. That can help then the parent help their kids support that through, as you were mentioning, more fluids, maybe a little bit more physical activity, more fiber, more fruits and vegetables, etc. Yeah.
So there are studies with comparing the microbiome of infants who go through a cesarean delivery versus a vaginal delivery, and there are differences in their gut microbiome even there, and then associating those who did not get born vaginally with potentially having outcomes that are associated with like eczema, allergies, asthma. So I think that we're really just starting to understand all of these things and the impact of the gut microbiome and the influence it has on actual outcomes, because you could study what's in the microbiome, which I actually had a question. How do we test if what's
Yeah.
in the kid's microbiome if a parent's interested? I want that answered, but I think that what's more important is like how the impact that it has. So if they have less of the good bacteria, but they're functioning fine, stools are great, no issues, then okay, like why are we going to change anything? But if it is really impacting a negative outcome, then it's worth maybe looking more into. So yes, my question is, how do we test? How do we know what? And
Yeah.
parents do this just on their own.
Yeah. So, you know what? Actually, the number one way to even just start to understand the stool is just looking at it. That is one of the first ways. Really, like, if you don't want to spend a ton of money and, go through this whole process, like, that right there will tell you a little bit. Like, look at the Bristol stool chart, compare your kid's stool to that, and start to understand, like, is it really like pebbles? Is it like diarrhea? Because that right there can start to shed light on what your next step is. If you really want to take the next step, you're like, look, I've done the Bristol stool chart. Like,
I'm sick of looking at poop.
yeah, exactly. Like, I need to know what's going on. There are ways you can test the stool. Tiny Health is one of our wonderful partners that you can test send a stool sample in and get a report on what is the bacterial composition of the gut. And you can start to say, wow, like, actually, my kid might have, this one pathogenic bacteria that's associated with, maybe this health issue. And how can we start to address that? Can work if you work with, your doctor as well, like, in that, showing that gut microbiome composition. There's different steps that can be taken if there's potentially some pathogenic bacteria that is presenting that could be having an overall issue. Other than that, supporting the good gut bugs, like, that's just something that we do every day when we eat, and how we eat, right? The types of foods that we are consuming, and helping grow those good gut bugs. And so I would say, by and large, like, that's what you want to do, is like, what you need to do. It's just the harder part sometimes is actually doing it, right?
Very much.
That can be trickier. So that's where the innovation comes in, of like, all right, we're going to, make this pasta dish with vegetables that are blended up, because your kiddo may not be able to know that, there's broccoli and squash in there. But, there's different ideas there that parents can use to try to, I guess, sneak some of those veggies in if you have to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I've tried a lot of books and recipes, and then my Instagram starts to become all kids recipes for how to sneak in vegetables.
Yep.
It's hard and time consuming, but I think it has to be a priority when, dealing with kids. All right, we actually came full circle, starting with nutrition and back to nutrition. So I'd like to pivot with the last few minutes here and hear about your journey as a founder.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of those things, Lindsay, that I'm just like so passionate about kids' health in general in America. I think that it's not okay that our kids have not been on a positive path forward. Kids are experiencing elevated levels of health chronic illnesses, and we really have to start to dig into like how can we change this? Because whatever we're doing is not working. And so for me, actually, the first place that I started was our first food. And the first food is infant formula, right? It's if you're not having breast milk, which by the way, I'm a fully, supportive of breastfeeding and breast milk, but I understand that that's cannot always be the case for a lot of families. And so when you do turn to infant formula, it's like what are your real options? And so that was really how I started Vegan Health, was an infant formula company. And many of the challenges that come with starting a highly regulated business were challenges that we faced at Begin. And so for me, I was like, we are always going to have our North Star on kids' health, but we approached it from essentially just a slightly different angle. And that's when we decided to really go after gut microbiome health because, gut microbiome, we are learning more and more, and there's still so much more to know. But we know that at the earliest of ages is actually the greatest opportunity for impact. And, I'm even curious in your practice too, like, as you mentioned, the C-section births versus vaginal births or breastfeeding versus infant formula feeding, early rounds of antibiotics, can be, again, antibiotics are life-saving, but they can wipe out a lot of the good bacteria. And so I'm curious what you recommend your patients if they are going through rounds of antibiotics.
Yeah, at this point, it's really the well-studied probiotics that we do recommend. I'm forgetting the strains right now. I'll add them in
Okay.
post-production, but it usually is a probiotic.
Yeah, because we know that like those are some of the things we do know is that you want the good gut bugs to be proliferating, right? And so antibiotics can be another challenge. And so in general, I would say, that's what really led me down this path is that the kiddos are experiencing astronomical levels, attacks at all angles for their good gut bugs. And so we're here to save the bifidobacteria and help support the good gut bugs and help parents, do that in clean and helpful ways.
Great. Any points that I've missed that you want to talk about before we wrap?
I'm really excited about the future of health. I'm excited about platforms like Blueberry. I think, so many families are looking to pull their pediatric practitioners into their lifestyles, like now in a modern way, right? And meeting the parent where they are. And I think, as companies like Blueberry and Begin are starting to really address what the parent is looking for in a modern way. And I'm just really excited today to be here to chat more about gut microbiome health for kids because it's talked about a lot with respect to adults, but really the opportunity to modulate the gut really can happen at those early ages. And the gut really is shown to modulate pretty quickly and balance pretty quickly once those interventions happen. And so, I'm just excited to share with your audience, the power of the gut microbiome and how we can start to make those changes early on for good lifelong health.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Really, really enjoyed this and I learned a lot.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the show for more episodes. And if you love the show, if you haven't already, please be sure to leave us a 5-star review.